Whatever corner of YouTube you find yourself in, there will be commentary creators.
They're getting millions and millions of views, so what's the deal?
This genre gets to the core of YouTube's original motto: broadcast yourself. Instead of going to huge lengths for a single video, creators like Jarvis Johnson find millions of views by sitting at their desk and talking.
The internet is a very strange place.
His first videos to take off were about his life as a software engineer at Patreon.
But that's not the audience that I wanted to build.
He took a risk and found a strategic way to pivot his content, putting an emphasis on comedy.
And then when I came back that Monday, I had like 250,000 subscribers.
Wow. Whoa. In this interview, we dive deep into how creators can succeed in the commentary genre.
Everyone is mad at Instagram right now, and for good reason.
And how Jarvis has navigated life on the internet.
It's just like, this is just not sustainable. The YouTube algorithm said, you're done, kid.
So how would you explain the type of content you make right now?
How would I explain the content I make right now? It's a good question. The way that I would explain it is commentary. I also see people describe it as like reaction videos, just from the formulation of it, how the actual content looks. But the idea is, you know, what's something goofy that I have an opinion on that I can like make jokes about? And then I'm either writing a script about that on like one of my channels where it's like a little bit more prepared, or I'm just riffing off the cuff and doing more reactions, but I'm trying to, like the ratio of content, of source material to like my content is usually like, I'm adding a lot more than I'm taking, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like I'll watch 30 seconds and then just go off for like or not even watch 30 seconds, watch 5 seconds and then go off for like a while.
How do you sort of like survey the landscape and decide what you want to make a video about? Like, do you have a process for that? Or is it just sort of something internally where you just have to talk about it?
I think sometimes things just like land on your lap and you're like, oh, that's like an animation channel made a video about me, or made a video about a guy who was addicted to drinking breast milk. And he looked like me and his name was Jarvis. And so I was like, okay, this is content that has just been placed on my lap.
Yeah, you know, can't let that one pass by.
Yeah. That's free real estate.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm Jarvis, and I can't live without breast milk.
Oh God, this is so gross.
Cow's milk. Breast milk.
But other times there's things that, you know, I'll sometimes survey my audience, and that's how I found out about the devious licks trend on TikTok,
right? Mm-hmm.
Where it was like, oh, people are just they're just stealing stuff from school, or they're trashing bathrooms and stuff like that. And I was like, how big is this really? And then I did a call out for just people to share their stories with me. And I got like teachers and students and people from all over the place. People were sending me like their morning announcements videos that are unlisted on YouTube of their principal going, this has to stop. We have to stop debasing the holy land of school. And I was like, wow, what a ridiculous like thing that is also just a wacky TikTok trend. So I do like taking the things that we just like, we'll say, oh, you know, isn't it wacky what the kids are doing? And we just like move on from it and don't pay it any attention. What if we actually like drill down into that and see like what's going on and why? And that's fun. That's fun for me. So sometimes it's current events. Sometimes it's like things that like tickle my fancy, or things that just have an unexpected underbelly. Like very early on in my channel, I talked about content, right? I still do talk about content farms a lot, but the stranglehold that like 5-minute crafts and that sort of ilk had on YouTube back in like 2018 was something where it's like, this is being recommended to everyone. What is it and why? Because like these aren't videos that like most people I know are clicking on, but they're getting millions and millions of views. So what's the deal? But in terms of how I actually come up with ideas, it's a lot of scouring the internet. It's a lot of making a list of whenever I see something, like bookmarking it, and then like going and like having a meeting where we like look at all the ideas. I usually work with primarily one other person who's like a producer who I used to do improv comedy with. And so like we'll like sit and like just look at stuff and go, Ed, does this work? Does this work? Or what does this work for? Because now there's a couple of different ways to package content.
What do you think the ingredients are that make commentary videos so enjoyable to watch for the audience. Cause like even my wife doesn't watch YouTube.
Yeah.
But she loves commentary videos.
Yeah.
Like the Cody Ko, Noel Miller, Mark McGrath. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have.
That's like one of her favorite videos on the internet. And she can watch it over and
That's so
over
funny.
and laugh, and she'll send it to people. And she like cries laughing watching that video.
Yeah.
And that got her into like Cody and seeing, watching other commentary videos. And I'm so curious. I was like, she won't watch any other YouTube.
Yeah.
Like what in your perspective is the ingredients that make it have such a mass appeal?
I think it's very similar to stand-up comedy, where you're hearing someone's comedic voice, you're hearing their takes, you're hearing their opinions, and typically ideally you can see yourself in those. So if like I make an observation, you're like, I agree with that, I see that, this is also reflective of my worldview, or this is just goofy and we're like sharing a laugh.
That in. Wow.
Yep. I already don't want to be here.
It's kind of like the combination of the sort of podcast parasocial thing where it's like I spend a lot of time with this person in my ears, I feel like we're friends, and the shared experience of like having a laugh with your friends, especially like Cody and Noel stuff together, like definitely has that vibe. I think that it's like a combination of those two things.
Yeah. I
I
think
feel
that's
like
a good point.
commentary channels are also refreshingly self-aware.
Yes.
And maybe that's something you only notice if you watch a ton of YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's easy to feel like a lot of YouTube channels are taking themselves really seriously.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's really nice when you come to a commentary channel and they're completely aware of the fact that they're doing something that's not that serious, that it's like fun. Even if they put tons of hours of writing into it or they meticulously edited it, it comes off as like easy, which I guess is what comedy does as well. Like
right. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like when you watch a stand-up set, you're not thinking about the hours that someone spent workshopping the material. It seems very effortless and easy because that's the way that it's meant to be consumed. You know, it's almost like finding friends that you agree with who are sort of telling you stories that keep you engaged.
Right. What is like the Jarvis Johnson content landscape right now?
Yeah.
Because you have a couple different channels. You have Twitch. I'm just curious, like what is the
so
landscape
for me,
of content?
it is, there's the main channel, which I had like a bit of an identity crisis about a couple months ago. Where
That's the telltale sign that you're like a career YouTuber. You have like an existential identity crisis.
Yeah.
And you got to schedule those in.
Did you start another channel?
Yeah.
Well, I started plenty of channels. I'll get into that. What I'm moving towards is the main channel being more premeditated, usually more written or at least outlined, higher lift content. And then I have a second channel, which is called Jarvis Johnson Gold, and it's a premium channel that's free. Because the original reason that I made that channel was that I used to over-prepare videos. So I would have 2 hours of material for a video that would cut down to like 15 minutes. And I was like, there's definitely other stuff here that I could just put out. And I know there's an appetite for it. So then I would kind of cut those videos just into... It's like the cutting room floor stuff, but I would structure it as if it was its own standalone piece. But then it morphed into, I just want to go off the cuff about something silly and I don't want to think too much about it. And I don't want the stakes to be that high because if there's a country music TikTok house, maybe that's fun to look at for 30 minutes, but it's not something I want to pour over for days and script about because I don't really have that much to say. And I don't think it's causing any harm, but it's just like interesting and funny at the same time, and harmless, you know. In other times it's a place for mitigating risk, you know, because like I put the Radio Shack video on my second channel because I wasn't sure, Twitter being the least sort of one of the lesser relevant social medias, and Radio Shack being kind of a niche, like US only type thing, a story about their Twitter going bananas. I'm not sure how wide the appeal is for that. So then so when I'm not sure, sometimes I'm just like, put it on the Gold channel.
Have you found that like some of that content that you put on the second channel like overperforms because you're much more liberated and free.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just like this is like a classic tale for all creators with their second channels, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think we've seen it time and time again. And that's what emboldened me to do it. I was like, D'Angelo Wallace has a second channel. I've seen other people's second channels like overtake their main channels. And for me, because I was getting so in my head about my main channel, I was like, well, this is content that couldn't exist if I was forced to only put it on the main channel. So now, you know, if I was really second guessing whether or not to make something, now I have a place I can just make it rather than shelving it indefinitely.
So that decision then is based a little bit out of fear.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's
completely
so much
out of
fear.
fear.
Yeah. I call it mitigating risk. You call it fear. I call it fear also. But it is also a proving ground and a place to like learn and kind of have my most engaged audience. But it's nice that I can not stress myself out as much about it. I think a lot of these things are more internal than they are external because many people don't know the difference between the two things because they don't know the work that goes into it and they just go, I enjoyed it the same.
But like your video about Dan Blazarian on the main channel, it's that is what I would think is more high lift. Like you can tell that's very much written, it's investigative. It's almost like John Oliver.
Exactly. And that's like the way I used to and still in some ways think about my main channel, at least when I would do commentary pieces, is like John Oliver with less stakes. Okay. You know, it's like, because I'm probably not going to talk about, you know, pollution or, you know, how the world is ending, at least by the result of, you know, like I'm not going to talk about the governmental functions or whatever.
You're not trying to get like banned from a country.
Right, exactly. But I do think the format is valid in like, in many ways, a lot of things like John Oliver, even like The Daily Show, like back in Jon Stewart days are kind of just what commentary YouTube is. The structure is very similar.
And now a quick word from the sponsor of today's episode.
This episode is sponsored by Jelly Smack. Now, if you've been watching our channel for a while, you know that Jelly Smack uses technology, data, and their expertise to take creators like us from one social platform to many. So for example, they could take this YouTube video right here and use their advanced AI to actually cut it and optimize it for all types of different social platforms. And with this content across other social platforms, not only do you find new audiences, but you also find new revenue. Let me tell you a story about a creator named Charlotte Dobre. She joined the Jelly Smack Creator Program in August 2021. Jelly Smack launched her Facebook page, and within 1 year, she crossed over 2.1 million followers and 330 million views. And they're going to be launching a Snapchat show with Charlotte very soon. With Jelly Smack, it's a true partnership. They only make money when you make money, so it's no extra work for you. It's actually just extra revenue. Jelly Smack is trusted by creators like Mr. Beast, Bailey Sarian, and Nas Daily. So if you're a creator and you're interested in taking your content across the internet, then click the link in our description, go to Jelly Smack, click Get in Touch, and tell them that Colin and Samir sent you. All right, now back to our interview with Jarvis Johnson.
So going back to the question of, like how does the whole ecosystem fit together? Then there's the Twitch stream, which is still very much like in hobby mode right now because it's just like fun to do. I'm still trying to figure out what Twitch is, but I have like one big like sort of show on Twitch, and that's Darman Bingo, where it's like the premise of that is like we all are aware of Darman and his moral stories, but so I don't think I could add anything. If I were to make a main or gold video about Darman, I do not think that I can say anything that hasn't been said. However, the videos we found are so formulaic that you can make a bingo board about hyper-specific tropes. And that is pretty fun because it's fun for someone to, because also there's a little bingo application where people type in, they go to the link and everyone gets their own bingo board, and then everyone plays for like a gift sub or something like that at the end.
You're right, chat. This is a parking lot confrontation. Parking lot confrontation, mark it.
But it's also funny for new players because if you haven't watched the 30 some odd episodes there are of it, you may ask a question like, why is spaghetti on this bingo board? What could spaghetti happen to do with the Darman videos? But then for longtime fans, most of the time they eat food, it's spaghetti. And that's just a fun thing. That's just a fun thing that you notice and then you never unsee. That is, it's also like a lower lift place for collabs and places just to like, you know, have fun, have a friend pop in for a few minutes and stuff like that. Because Twitch is, not my main cup of tea. There's all these eyeballs on YouTube that would be into this content completely unedited. And so I essentially have a VOD channel it was originally called Jarvis Johnson VOD, but I realized a lot of people were asking me what VOD stood for, and I was like, don't worry about it. Yeah. So I changed it to Jarvis Johnson Live, and it's just like sliced up VODs with the thumbnail and title. And that's actually like doing really well. Like, it's like compared to what I would expect, getting a couple 100,000 or even a couple million views on unedited VODs is like a wild,
that's crazy,
like thing.
Yeah.
And it's cool to have that as another place to experiment and learn things about your audience. And when I went to my meet and greet, I found that like that type of stuff is the stuff that like my most engaged audience loves, because when I'm streaming a couple of times a week, that means there's daily content on the VOD channel. And when I went to VidCon and I had a meet and greet, that was like most people were talking about the streams, which I'm only like, it's like 1,000 to 2,000 concurrents when I'm live on Twitch, but then there's, hundreds of thousands of views on the actual VODs.
I think it's because like also a streaming audience has impact on the stream itself.
Yeah.
Right. So they're creating the content with you.
Yeah.
And like we at VidCon went to the Dream SMP panel.
That's
that was like the most engaged fan base was there. Right.
It's like they have impact and they have the most amount of available time to spend with you.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. And some of that stuff is born out of me myself consuming a lot of Twitch VODs at home or watching Twitch streams where I'm just like, I just need something in the background while I do my chores, and finding a 7-minute video, I'm gonna have to switch my video so soon, or even a 20-minute video. Whereas like if I'm driving somewhere, like if I'm going to see my friends in Irvine, it's like gonna take me a couple hours to get there or an hour to get there. But if I'm going to San Diego, it's gonna take me a couple hours to get there. Let me pop on a Twitch stream or a VOD, then I'm never gonna have to, it's like a radio show,
Wow, yeah.
Whereas, and that is I think the type of consumption that when I look in my analytics, I could be discouraged if I saw that a 30-minute VOD clip is getting the same retention as a 30-minute YouTube video on my main channel. If I like really thought about it. But when I think about when I think about it's a more niche audience, and it's the type of consumption is very much like background, like set it and forget it. I don't know if you heard this about like Netflix recently. Obviously, they're going through some trials and tribulations right now with identity and their IPs, but they've spoken about trying to find not new Squid Games, but new Emily in Paris's, because that show is like very cheap to produce, and it's a show that people like put on in the background.
Laundry TV.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And like finding that, what do they call it? They called it like ambient television or something.
I've heard it as laundry TV, which is like TV you put on to fold the laundry.
Yeah, exactly.
Even YouTube now has a listenable tab, right? Yeah. If you're going through search, like they have podcasts, but then they also have listenable.
Oh, I have had YouTube Premium for as long as they've had background listening, because that's the primary way that I'm consuming. Yeah. I am not looking at my phone most of the time. I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone. And
so your Twitch streams are Emily in Paris, but your main channel is Squid Game. Sort of.
Ideally. I don't think I have my Squid Game yet. I don't have my Squid Game yet.
But like when you talk about Love is Blind on your main channel and it gets like 1.5 million views, right?
Yeah.
Like people are most likely plugged into that.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Because you have to watch the source material.
Yeah,
you do.
And that stuff is really interesting because I'm presenting it. I would say that, I actually don't know the percentage, but just like qualitatively, like looking at comments and stuff, whenever I'm putting something about The Bachelor or something about like one of these reality shows on my main channel, I'm going, okay, this is topical, but I want to make sure that the person doesn't have to watch the thing to know what's going on.
Then him just like gleaming. He's just beaming looking at himself.
When we interviewed Marquez, he said to us, he views this as like a long-term career for himself. And a lot of it is because in the tech genre, he was like, the tech needs to be interesting. I don't need to be interesting.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting comment that I hadn't really heard before.
Yeah.
And I'm curious when you look at the commentary genre as a whole, because it kind of has emerged, right, on YouTube. Like you can close your eyes and imagine if you watch YouTube, like Cody Ko, Drew Gooden, Curtis Connor, right?
There's also a culture of collaboration that's really heavy. So you can't help but see like Drew and Danny and Cody.
Or I mean,
like
there's
Curtis
like
Connor,
Chad. There's a lot of new creators too. Like Nick is not green. Yeah.
Is that a similar? Do you feel similarly about that? Some of the reason that you feel stability in the genre or in your content is because as long as there's weird internet trends, culture, things happening, there's something for you to react to, and as long as that's interesting, you can still make videos.
So I definitely don't wholly disagree with that, but I think the commentary is always going to be around. You know, the ecosystem that the commentary genre came up in is like when like Logan Paul and Jake Paul were doing something wacky every week.
Got it.
You know, and it's like, oh, he went to Japan and he did what? And like that, and not even specifically the thing that we're all thinking about, but even like throwing Pokeballs at Japanese people and stuff, or at cars and stuff like that, where it's like, why are you doing this? Or these wacky music videos. And that type of stuff is not really happening on YouTube. Prank videos and things like that. Like a lot of these things are not happening on YouTube in the same way. And I think that some of the stuff that is worth talking about, it can be kind of dark as well. And so I think that that's, you know, why some people have moved more into, you know, like movies and things of that nature. So there is definitely always something to talk about, and the format like is strong. Like I noticed this very early when I was talking about like life hacks and stuff. There was a certain point where I was just like not surprised by anything. You know, it's like there's only, and I can't fake, I couldn't like phone that in to save my life. Like I kind of need to like be exposed to like novel things. Like when I first talked about 5 Minute Crafts, I was like, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. And I need to get to the bottom of this. And now I've seen so much that it's hard for me to like kind of have that same reaction. So I think that that's partly why I'm like looking to different ways to follow my own curiosity, because it's not always like, I think the format is strong, but I don't know if it's necessarily always the well that I want to personally be drawing from.
I always like try and judge things off of my wife and my brother, who are not really a part of internet culture. You can say Radio Shack Twitter to me, and I'm like, I like my mind is like, I've read all the tweets.
Like
I know
Darman,
exactly.
Or like Darman.
Or Darman.
It's its own brand.
Yeah. And we are collectively like very engulfed in the internet's culture, right? Even Andrew Tate. There's a lot of people who have no idea who that guy is, right? But we're so in this world. I'm just curious, if we go back in time, like, were you always into the internet?
Yes. I think I am a person who spent most of their time online, just like growing up. My safe space growing up was like the computer room in my aunt's apartment, where I would just like close the door and I would be in my like own little zone. And when I walk into my office now, it kind of feels like that same vibe. But yeah, so I mean,
like a little kid exploring.
Yeah, or just internet. Like finding. I was. It's like I had a weird childhood in that I lived far away. I mean, I had some like sort of stuff that I won't go into, that just like challenges in my childhood, but I lived far away from my friends, and I didn't go outside a lot on my own at a certain point. And so the place that and I also wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I wasn't like, I was a very shy kid, but the place that I could be myself and I could really explore my own creativity was online. I had a podcast when I was like 14.
Really?
Where it was just like me and my friends doing stuff. Like it was like, it was like me and my friend Russell, who like, it was like, let's learn to screen print t-shirts. Let's learn to edit videos. I made there's a video on my channel. There was like one of the first videos on my channel. It was me dancing a High School Musical. That was like put up in 2007. And it was like, that was filmed at Russell's place with his dad's camera. And so it's like, we would always like find little like hobbies, like new hobbies to do. one of those was podcasting. So we did that, and we just talked about things that pertain to 14-year-olds.
Were there people listening?
Yeah, people from, it was distributed on Facebook, and because
your podcast was distributed on Facebook?
Well, listen, that was the growth engine. That's where we had reach. We had the tens of friends or whatever from our school.
Yeah. So how does that then evolve from there? So you're making content online, you're a part of these very niche communities. You have internet friends that, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are probably your primary friend group or your internet friends.
It was like I had friends in real life, but I think it was like I spent just as much time talking to people online as I did offline.
Yeah.
And from there, I mean, it was time to go to college. And so I ended up getting into Georgia Tech, and I studied computer science. And so then my life became sort of super focused on that. And there was a building aspect, and a building aspect for small groups of people there too, because I think of editing videos very much the same way as writing code, because you're just creating a product, and these are just the tools that you can manipulate the thing that you're working with.
And it's all like a puzzle, right? It's this has to make sense so that this can make sense so that this can make sense.
It activates the same creative problem solving parts in my brain. And then from there it was the big deal is let's go get an internship at one of these fancy companies. And then I got an internship at Google after that doing back-end web development. And that was the big deal. It was oh my God, I was a huge fan of stand-up comedy this whole time. I was a huge fan of going to see comedy shows. I was not to flex, but I was an early John Mulaney fan. And that was my other thing. I was listening to podcasts. You didn't have
to flex on us like that.
Yeah,
There's a lot of line.
Yeah, it was a combination of podcasts and stand-up specials.
Yeah.
I would just listen to Donald Glover, John Mulaney, Jim Gaffigan, or even old school
remember the Dane Cook CD was a big deal
that was big.
then.
That was big.
The Dane Cook CD was.
I definitely
thing.
had that one.
Yeah.
I had that one. Harmful as Swallowed.
Yeah.
With the little skull and crossbones with Dane Cook's head. Yeah.
And did you have a desire to be a comedian at this time?
No, I actually thought that I never could. I always had this thing where I was I'm in my own lane doing this stuff, this tech stuff. So I'm just gonna, go to SF Sketchfest every year and go to all these fun shows. And that's when things are gonna come to me, and I'll go, sometimes I'll go a little further for a concert or for a comedy show, and that'll be the extent of it. And then I started doing improv once I got out to San Francisco and I got sort of settled while I was still at Yelp. I started doing improv comedy and actually performing comedy. And then, so I took the 5 classes, and then I started performing on a Herald team every week. And that was the first taste I had for performing. And then we actually got to perform at Sketchfest, and being in green rooms or being at after parties and stuff with people that I had sort of held in really high regard. I was oh, these people are actually accessible. This is kind of crazy. Yeah. I still feel I'm in my own little world, but it is cool that I can have this experience, and this will be the extent of it.
Comedy at that time was your second channel IRL.
It
was low stakes because it wasn't connected to your livelihood, right?
Exactly.
You were working at Yelp full time and got to express yourself creatively with no stakes, really.
Yeah. And even when I left Yelp, it was partly because I had a lot of energy and wanted to sort of further my career, because I was very career minded, and wanted to continue growing. And especially in a system, this is the hardest part about going full-time creators, because there was already a paved system that I could work within. So I could just put all my energy into that and try to figure out how to get myself as far as I could. And so when Yelp kind of, I had a lot of one-on-ones where it was keep doing what you're doing. And I was okay, but I'm asking to do more. I'm asking for more responsibility. And it was just there was just too much red tape at the size of the company it was at. So I was okay, I'll go to a smaller company. And then that company ended up being Patreon.
How many people were involved?
It was
at that point?
40 to 50 people, I think, when I joined. And there was and less than half of that was engineering. So it was they had just raised a Series B. So it wasn't like, I mean, now they've raised like Series G, F, whatever. Sure. And it's like $1 billion company or whatever. But back then it was like a $30 million valuation at their Series B. And it was like, they were really hungry. And it was just a lot of people who were like professionals in whatever they did, but then were also like creative adjacent. They were huge fans of creators, or they were musicians, artists. Everybody kind of had a thing. And like my thing was that I was doing improv on the side. And like the team would come to like my improv like show. When I had a big improv show, like people would come, and that was like super cool. And I just kind of, I felt very like seen there, at least by like the actual like my coworkers, because we all had so much in common. We all self-selected to be there at that stage of the company too. And so it's like a lot of like heart and soul being put into the product and put into work every day.
Was there a moment where at Patreon you saw a creator start to earn a living and like a light bulb maybe went off and like, oh wow, okay, this is people are making real money doing this?
Yes, but I was always still like, oh yeah, but not me, right? But where I really felt like, oh, we're not so different is when the first time I had that feeling was Patreon had the first of its like internal convention called PatreCon. And the first year of it was at the Patreon office just on a weekend. And they were like having trouble finding people to volunteer. And I was like, I'll volunteer. I want to like hang out with creators the whole weekend. And I was just like a note taker, like sitting in panels and like taking notes and stuff. And one of the panels I was in was creators talking about their like fears. When I was hearing people talk about stuff, I was like, wow, these are the things I'm worried about. You know, like these are the reasons I'm not making anything.
What were some of those fears?
I think that just like, honestly, it's all the classic stuff of like feeling like you're pigeonholed, feeling like you're not good enough, having that imposter syndrome, and then like financial security stuff. And so that planted the seed. And then I ended up going to VidCon, myself and my friend Mayuko, who's now a full-time YouTuber. So that's another funny thing. We both went to a panel that was like about starting. It's like, so you want to start a YouTube channel or something like that. And Nick Jenkins, who was a producer at SciShow, or a producer at Complexly, like just doing SciShow and Crash Course and stuff, was talking about how there's like space for your voice on the internet. Because I definitely in my head was like, well, no one wants to hear what I have to say, right? Like that's like the natural, I feel like it's pretty natural to feel that way. But still like wanting to create and wanting to put yourself out there and being a fan for so long, you at least want to, you know, sometimes I think I had a history of like being a fan of stuff and like wanting to try doing it. And Maiko and I both like bought cameras and like made our first like videos. And that was like the beginning of like my YouTube career, I guess.
Can you walk us through what that first video was? Because we've watched it a couple times.
Well, yeah, my first video, it's so bad. But that's the whole point of it. It's called Baby Steps, and it's just like me doing a Vlog Brothers-y style video where I'm talking about my fear of like public failure.
Whatever I make is gonna suck, like really bad.
And it's something that I've struggled with in the past, and like, you know, still in some shades struggle with today. But I had put out a couple of videos very early on YouTube that like performed well for YouTube back then. One of them was like the High School Musical video, but then I also posted a couple of other videos that did well. But I think I got in my head about posting something that like underperformed, especially because I hadn't made anything that was like putting myself out there, and I wanted to do that, but I was afraid to. And where I was comfortable with the podcast because it was just the only audience was, you know, friends of ours who were already accepted me as a person, whereas like the internet is this very scary place to like put yourself out there. I was worried that I couldn't make anything good. What I was arriving at in that video was like, that doesn't matter because you have to like make something bad to make something good. So it's like, this is like on the path. It's like that so I'm like, I'm afraid to do something, so I'm going to do it and it's going to be bad, but we're going to do it anyway. And then we're going to keep going. And that was like the whole like message of the video.
It's interesting. You're watching it and it's like a message to your future self.
Yeah.
Regardless of how this video performs, there's going to be another one. It's just baby steps.
Almost reassuring that this career that you're potentially embarking on has the absence of all of the rules that my other careers have had.
Yeah,
you mentioned you're so like career focused. Like there are ways to succeed in high school, in college, in your job.
Yep. 100%.
And you know what they are.
There's a great quote from this book, Creativity Inc., about the foundation of Pixar.
Yeah.
And he's talking about like in, I think it's the 60s or 70s, he's talking about wanting to become an animator. And he's recognizing that at that point, it was much easier to explain to someone how to become a doctor than it was to become an animator.
Yeah.
And I was recognizing that was so similar to the world of being a creator in that like, we all have a general understanding of like, oh yeah, you go to school, then you go to med school, then you get a residency, then you have a general understanding of the roadmap to becoming a doctor.
Definitely.
But the general roadmap of becoming a creator, especially at that time, was just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just start uploading videos and then see what happens.
Yeah. And it's not that much better now. I mean, it is better, but even when I think I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder about how opaque certain things are in the industry or how, predatory it can be when you start getting like outreach from people and you're like not sure how to vet them. I was not in that situation because like even the first contracts I was given, I was just like, hey, Colin, Patreon's, counsel, can you point me at a lawyer contact that I can talk to? You know what I mean? Like not everybody has that. Yeah. Specifically like someone who like, I was like, somebody who works with creators on contracts. So like, can you point me?
Yeah. Wait, from that first upload though to like that first year, when did things,
so like,
did you get more comfortable uploading? When did things like pick up?
So Mayuko's first video got 1 million views. So like my first video was like, everything I make is gonna be bad. Yeah. And then like Mayuko's first video was like, day in the life of a software engineer. And it just like blew up. And
you're like, I'm done.
I was like, what is this supposed to happen? Like, am I already a like failure at this? And she was like making videos about life in tech and that kind of thing. And that's not what I initially saw for myself, but I was like, it certainly would be nice to capture some audience. And so I was like, oh, I've got stories to tell. And then that morphed into, I think I made one video where it was more like informational about tech. And then I started going into, oh, well, let me tell like a funny story and it happens to be about tech. So like people are going to have a hook for, this, how I got a job at Google while failing my interview, which is a real thing that happened. But I would just kind of do relatable, like software engineers be like, but that's not exactly what I was doing, that was the vibe.
And then the viewership was picking up with
because every time I would put software engineer in my title, it would like do well. I realized fairly quickly, but then I was kind of caught in a niche. The audience that I was getting was not the audience that I wanted to be building, especially like from that first video and from like the communities that I've seen. I found myself like very disconnected from my audience. Whereas, like one example of this is like in some of these videos, I would get one comment specifically that I remember was, the information in here is really good, but could you like cut out the jokes? Like can we compress this so that like it's like there's more information? I was like, you have come to the wrong place. That's it's like this video wouldn't exist if it weren't for the jokes. The information is like the thing I feel like I have to do to like pay lip service to this audience. But what I really want to do is like be the goofy guy. And
I just want to note that we got a very similar comment on Reddit recently.
Really?
Yeah, that said, guys, I really enjoyed the information here and the value, but the jokes are getting in the way.
I want to validate that person's right to exist, but I just don't relate to them, right? And it's like, and they think they're giving constructive feedback based on what they want to see. Right. And now they've got some sort of parasocial relationship where they feel like they're in it with you. And that can be such a beautiful thing, but it also sort of has this double edge.
It's also like saying, Jarvis, could we just remove the Jarvis from this video?
That's what it felt like to me. Yeah. Right. That's what it felt. And I'm sure that's not what they intended in writing it. There's this there's this true inflection point. I was watching Drew Gooden's videos on YouTube, and this was 2017. So he had like 100,000 subscribers, and his like video that had just came out was like his 5,000 subscriber special. Cause like after his 5,000 subscriber special, his like channel blew up. And I was like, oh, this is so cool.
So I'm celebrating the first and hopefully not last YouTube subscriber milestone.
And I'd never seen, I like missed the H3 wave and stuff like that. And also their version of commentary is not like, I wouldn't watch that and go, I want to do this. But when I watched Drew's video, I was like, oh, I really love, like, it sounds like you're just doing stand up. Mm-hmm. But instead of saying, hey, we've all had airplane food, so with that shared context, let me make a joke about it. Because that joke doesn't work unless we all have an experience with airplane food.
Right.
Yep.
Drew going, okay, you haven't seen this content or you haven't seen this thing. Let me share it with you and then let me make jokes about it. Because now you're seeing it for the first time, and I'm gonna crack wise on top of that. Maybe I'm gonna hit on some of your first impressions, but do it in a comedic way. And I was like, oh, yeah.
It's like introducing shared context.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think it's like you're introducing the shared context and then you're joking about it. You're setting the foundation, setting them up and then knocking them down. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I made this video about just life hacks, and it was just like a traditional, like, let me try some goofy life hacks video, and completely flopped. It like, you know, I think at the time I was getting like 30 to 40K views on videos, and this, I think I got like 10 to 15K, and it was like 10 out of 10, like worst performing video. YouTube is essentially saying, hey, try again next time. Like this isn't it. And
basically saying like back to day in the life of a software engineer.
That's what because that is, you know, to this day, one of the traps you can like the creators can catch themselves in is like taking away the wrong thing from the analytics because of how it's presented, especially when it's like, you know, if you're playing to a different audience, it's going to be like, hey, your audience isn't vibing with this video. And it's like, that was kind of the point actually.
Yeah.
Right.
But around the same time, I saw Cody Ko had put out a video just called 5-Minute Crafts. And when I had put out my video about 5-Minute Crafts, I was like, no one knows what 5-Minute Crafts is. So I'm going to call it the worst life hacks I've ever seen, because the previous video was called the worst software engineering advice I've ever seen. So I was like, this just makes sense. And, but when Cody Ko called his 5-Minute Crafts, I was like, oh, well, my video has like 10,000 views right now. If I change my title to be closer to Cody Ko's, maybe there's a chance that it can get recommended. I did it on the YouTube Studio app even. Like I was like sitting at the TV and I was like, hit save, like close the app. And then I think a couple of days later, it got like 2 million views in like 2 days or something. It just completely spiked. And I was like, well, this is interesting. In the comments of that 5-Minute Crafts video, people are like, you think this is bad? You should see Troom Troom. And I was like, okay. And then I just did a video on Troom Troom, and I did Troom Troom is actually the worst channel on YouTube. Because I was like, maybe that, you know, I was like trying to make it map as closely as I could to that audience, so that audience knew, hey, this is for you. The video is doing okay. The video is doing okay. But then a few days later, it was like, it was number 1 out of 10. And then all of the percentages were like 999%. Like it was just like blowing up because those people were actually watching the video. I think when I went into work on that Friday, the 5-Minute Crafts video had 400,000 views and the Troom Troom video had just come out. Oh, and I had 50,000 subscribers. And then when I came back that Monday, I had like 250,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And like that 5-Minute Crafts had like a couple million views, and the Troom Troom video had like
that's a significant
hundreds of thousands of views. Yeah, it was crazy.
Was there a thought of like, oh, maybe I should leave Patreon and be a creator? Like, when did that thought start to come?
Yeah, I think it would take some months. It was definitely like, that was the point of like, oh, because before this was just like a hobby, but this is actually like a really significant like development. Yeah. Every time I would deviate from the specific niche of like talking about one of these wacky content farms, people like fell off. And I was nervous because I was like, am I building long-term fans, or am I just building like like, because I'm not thinking about, can I do this full time yet? Because I'm worried that this might just be a fad thing and I might not be able to convert this into anything else. And
were people at Patreon supportive of this?
Yeah, people were very supportive.
So they were like, oh, cool, Jarvis is becoming a creator.
Yeah. Everyone was really supportive of Mayuko and myself. I think I didn't leave Patreon until I had like 400 or more thousand subscribers. Like,
what gave you that confidence?
Yeah, especially from a monetization standpoint.
Yeah.
Like,
was there dollars coming in, or like
there were dollars coming in? It was like, I remember seeing the AdSense payment of like, I think like it was like $13,000 or something from 1 month. In which a video going that viral now would make probably a lot more money on my channel. But the CPM was really low. There was no other videos on my channel. Like, so it was just raw. These like 2 videos and stuff. Like they were championing this. And I was like, oh, that's like serious money that if I was like actually able to continue this momentum, then maybe that would be sustainable. But right now it's like not something that I can continue to capture. So there's very much a leap of faith there. The transition for me was very difficult. And in many ways I still feel like I'm transitioning into the role of a full-time creator to this day. Because I left Patreon officially in like February of 2019. Then I was in San Francisco with all my friends who worked in tech and were working their like tech jobs. And I was the oddball that was just like at home all day, like trying to work, going to coffee shops, like trying to figure out YouTube stuff. And it didn't feel good. I realized that I was lacking a lot of the structure that I used to have, and even the fitting work into the nooks and crannies life that I was living before kind of gave me structure. You know, it was like it was like the leftover space was still a form of structure.
You also have community.
And community.
Yeah. That's, I think, the most jarring thing when we left our jobs and we're like, all right, we're going to be creators. It's very exciting. But then you're like, oh, it's just us all day.
Yeah.
Huh? And we had each other.
It got strange fast.
We had each other, but it got really weird because it was like every day it's just you and I, and we come up with the schedule. And then as things are like, for us, things weren't working. And then it's like, you're just sitting in a room and you're like, so this also isn't working?
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I feel that. Like, it's so funny now because I was like, why was I putting myself through this? Yeah, I was kind of just like alone. And I was writing and editing everything myself and shooting everything myself, obviously. And I was just like unhappy. It was like very,
just judging yourself in a timeline.
Yeah.
Did you have financial pressure at this time too?
So because I took so long to actually quit, I saved like pretty aggressively to make sure that I could afford the window of time that I was giving myself. And
what window of time was that?
So I think it was like 6 months.
Got it. So you're like, I got 6 months to make it as a creator.
Yeah. And but it was 6 months assuming zero income from YouTube. And I did already have income from YouTube, but I kept going, this can go away at any point. So I just have to assume it's zero. Basically, I was kind of like stuck. It was like a stuck period where I was like making stuff, but like not really that frequently. And I like wasn't enjoying myself. And then I went to a YouTube summit in New York where I was invited, and I was not sure why I was there, because I was like probably the smallest creator that was there. Mr. Beast was there, for example, and like Marquez Brownlee and like all these people that like I was like, oh my God. Kris Jenner was there randomly.
Wow. And what is this event?
Yeah, Kris Jenner was talking about like building your team, which the cynic in me is like, oh, you mean your family? I was just like listening to what she was saying, and I was like, you know what? Like, if I move to LA, it's cheaper to live there than San Francisco, and I could probably afford to hire somebody to help me. At least give me, like, literally, I was like, I just need a warm body to talk to that's like a coworker. You know what I mean? So I was like thinking of who that could be. And I reached out to my friend Anastasia, who I had And I'm pretty sure I'm texting during Kris Jenner's talk.
Yeah. She was so inspiring that it was like, take action in that moment.
I like literally I took action right in that moment. It's just such a funny thing to me. But I was like,
I hope you get to tell Kris Jenner one day.
Yeah, one day. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But now I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, maybe I'll move to LA and I'll hire Anastasia and we'll like work together, and at least I'll have some. And I think we had maybe worked together on some, maybe I'd asked her to like proofread some scripts or something like that at that point, so she knew what I did. But yeah, and then I think a few months later, like I actually like made the move in September of 2019. And so I had a good like 5-ish months before COVID like happened. So then that was another like kind of false start where I had also hired an editor that I was working with, who, you know, I love collaborating, but there is like a certain like ramp up period with anyone, like where you're like kind of teaching them your style. And it's like, they could be the best in the world, but it's just like, if you have a specific thing in mind, it's hard to like put what's in your head into someone else's head.
Comedy is especially challenging.
Exactly, yeah. And to this day, the editors I work with, I think are incredibly talented, but I still like do the final pass of everything and just do like pacing edits and stuff like that. Or I'll like literally record myself editing, or like they'll send me a cut and I'll record myself with their cut in Premiere and give notes about hyper specific things, because I'm like, eventually I want you to be able to do this, but you have no idea this is not your fault that this doesn't feel right to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. I moved to LA and then pandemic happened. Like I started, you know, I was like, I took a few months off of YouTube, which again, like if you take months off, it like really hurts the momentum of the channel.
Going into this break, I guess I'm a little confused. Like, was the channel successful? Like, even if you weren't maybe feeling good?
I could. Yeah, actually, that's like, a great point. Everything was fine and I could live. You know what I mean?
So that 6-month window panned out.
Yeah,
like you made the videos that
I made the videos. I like went to VidCon. I signed with my manager.
Got it.
Started doing like brand deals.
Personally, though, you're unhappy with like the process.
Yeah, personally, I'm just like, something isn't clicking, you know?
But business-wise, it's like you made it work.
Yeah,
like
business-wise, things are working. Yeah, and I think that's the sort of trap I found myself in, where me moving to LA and being like, I can do anything I want to do content-wise, but I don't know what I want to make. Like I was like feeling like a lack of inspiration, and I was like, I can rinse and repeat formats that are already working, but I know that like not everything is like I'm super excited about, and I used to have that excitement about like certain things. So I was like, oh, where did that go? And like, is it ever coming back?
Knowing what you know now today about the career of being a creator, what do you feel like aspiring creators should know about it? Because it's like the number one most desired job.
Yeah, which is wild. Yeah.
So like, and like we know a lot about it now.
Yeah.
And like we talked about before, it's like when you made the jump, there's no like plug and play roadmap of like, oh, you do this, then you do that, and then boom, you're a creator.
I mean, I just think that if you have no preference about what you do or what you make, then you can follow a roadmap and become a successful creator. But you have to ask yourself, is that something that's sustainable for you? For me, it's not. Like if it was like, okay, you're going to become a cooking YouTuber and you just have to do these things and you need to post these videos as frequently, I wouldn't do that. Just like, I wouldn't be excited to like wake up in the morning and like do stuff. And even now working my job, some days I like wake up and I'm like, why am I not excited? Like, what do we need to change? What do we need to change? And that flexibility, like, I feel like I've made choices in my career that have expressly not, like furthered my career because I'm still figuring things out and I don't know where I want to step on the gas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there a specific thing you could talk about there?
Well, I mean, earlier I mentioned that like if I really wanted to, like there were times during my channel's growth where it's like, oh, if I just keep doing this thing that's successful, then the numbers will keep going up. But I had already had that experience with tech where I was like, I don't want to turn one sort of pigeonholing into another. So I'm trying to figure out how to like broaden my brand like holistically so that there's a wider array of things that I can do where I don't feel like I'm running the risk of like pigeonholing myself.
Like just covering maybe dating shows or something like that.
Exactly.
There's definitely a thing that happens as a creator where you find the thing that works.
Yeah.
And it's super exciting because you're like, oh my God, I found the thing that works.
Yeah.
And then over time, you're like, oh,
but why does it work?
Yeah, I found a thing that works. And then you get confused of like, wait, do I like it because it works? Or do I like it because I like it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the moment where you're like, as a true creative, I think you made a really good point. Like if you have no preference over what you make, it's actually easier to become successful.
Yeah, I mean, if you go in, I don't want to name any names, but like if you go into, okay, I'll name a name.
Here we go.
I don't think Darman is passionate about the content that he makes. I think that he's a serial entrepreneur. He just is. Sure. He had a weed business before content.
If he was passionate, he would switch up the noodle.
Yeah.
Spaghetti, rigatoni.
Yeah, exactly.
Farfalle.
No, and this isn't a slight against that content. I would make several slights against the content at a separate point, but it's very clear that the goal is how can I build this business? And so then all of the questions are much easier to answer about what do you make, because it's like follow the trends, make like why is there a PS5 in the Darman bingo card? Because for that demographic, PS5, people are going to be excited about a PS5. It's going to make them think about how they want one for Christmas or whatever. So someone getting one as a gift in a video is going to,
it's a completely distributor's mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going to work?
Yeah, and it works, and it works extremely well. But if you put me in charge of Darman's channel tomorrow, I wouldn't be happy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what makes me happy. You know what I mean?
And that's an evolution.
Yeah.
Which is challenging because you're chasing your own personal desires and you're attaching them to an audience and an algorithm.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you're like, hopefully if I do this
so you're
thing,
riding a wave. Yeah,
hopefully they'll follow me.
Yeah, some people are like, I'll do one for them, one for me or whatever. I would prefer to be able to like do everything for me. Not like in a selfish way, but more like in a way that is, how do I make this sustainable for a long period of time? Because I do want to be making stuff for a long period of time.
So there was an article in TubeFilter where you talked about how as you were approaching 1 million subscribers, at 975, you like took a break, took a pause.
Yeah, even, I don't even know when it was, but I definitely man, so y'all are about to hit 1 million subscribers soon. How are y'all feeling about it? Before I answer about myself.
It's an interesting thing because we've been making YouTube videos for 10 years, not on this channel, but like on different channels.
Right.
It's something that we've never done, and that there was a long period of time that I thought would never happen.
Yeah.
There was a very long period of time where I was like, oh, we will never have a channel that hits 1 million subscribers.
Right.
And then I had to like back myself into reasoning that and be like, oh, we're more for niche audiences. And that's okay. We'll have a dedicated group of people. But it's still like YouTube even informs you that it's a thing you should strive for by giving you an award.
Right.
So you can't help but be like, I want this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm already nostalgic for it. Like there's really not that many physical things that you can have around you that speak to what this career is.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm really excited just to get the plaque and have it on the wall. I immediately envision myself when I'm like 75. Oh, like, that was a good time.
This is a perfect answer. This is not how I treated reaching 1 million subscribers. How I treated reaching 1 million subscribers was being frustrated with myself that it didn't happen sooner.
I got it.
And then knowing that I think at a certain point, I like realized it would happen eventually. So it became less of a, like, it was like, this is going to happen. And so I was just so in my head about numbers at the time, and I didn't allow myself to enjoy it. I have a, fatal flaw where it's like, I don't allow myself to enjoy things. And I disqualify myself from feeling that sense of achievement. And that's just something that I've been working on. But it happened too with like I was like a Forbes 30 under 30 thing. And just immediately my head goes, this isn't a meritocracy, it's like, it doesn't really matter, blah, blah, blah. But if someone wins like an Oscar, they're allowed to be excited about, even if they're like, we didn't have the objectively best movie, but still, and so I think that I'm trying to just like take my wins. My channel's like growth has slowed a lot recently because I just haven't been posting very frequently. But if and when I do hit 2 million subscribers, I think I'm going to be more appreciative of it, which is I'm going to take a page out of the Colin and Samir book. And
imagine yourself at 75.
I'll make my own plaque. That's the plan.
In this moment, are you doing everything for you?
No, I don't think so. Like, I think that but I'm I think that I'm doing this balance of like what works versus like exploring things that interest me.
Sure.
And that is like the best that I can ask for, because at least I'm having the time and space to figure out what the next thing is. Because without giving, which is like the type of R&D that I couldn't do if I was like working a full-time job in a completely unrelated field and then just trying to fill my time with like another something that works. But there is something that changes when you go from like hobby to full-time job. That's like, when it's just a goof on a weekend where you're like, oh, haha, I'm going to like talk about like life hacks. That's fun. But then when it's like, now you need to talk about life hacks, it's a completely different vibe.
Like this video about life hacks is also worth X dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I need it to work so that I can
right. Yeah, exactly. That's just a completely different.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm in that situation, but it is like sometimes I take smaller risks. Like I feel like I should take bigger risks to find out sooner what those things are that I like want to be doing. And also what you want to be doing can change and will evolve with time. So I think going back to like advice for people, like enjoy what you're doing. It's easier said than done, I think at a certain point. And don't let the algorithm run your life, because like if I were just following the algorithm, I would just be making the first thing that popped off over and over and over again.
Right.
Because that is the only way that you were going to kind of continue being rewarded in the same way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah,
absolutely. My pleasure.